Well, happy Friday, everyone, and welcome to this week's Fireside Chat. I'm Lisa Stearns, and I'm, of course, here with Dr. Tim Cross, our Senior Vice President. Today, we'll be discussing how re-entry into the workplace is progressing. Plus, we'll gain some insight into some coping strategies when it comes to this pandemic, which I know we could all use as this thing goes on. Couple reminders, you know the drill. Be sure to keep your audio muted so everyone can hear the conversation. Use the chat function on Zoom to ask any questions you may have, and you can publicly post those questions, or you can send them to me privately via chat. And of course, a recording of this session will be made and posted to the UTIA coronavirus website. You can find that link at our new website, utia.tennessee.edu. So, Tim, we do have students now back on campus, and we do have our offices reopening. What does the case count look like?
Well, thank you, Lisa, for once again kicking us off and moderating our Fireside Chat today. And welcome, everyone. Glad to have those of you that are able to join us with us today, and glad to have a chance just to share some updates and have a really good conversation also about how we're doing in terms of an organization. But let's start out, as Lisa suggested, and get an update on cases, because we hear a lot in the news, and yet sometimes we don't feel like we have a lot of specificities. Well, first, we have had some positive cases around campus. Students started returning Sunday. And actually, over the past couple of weeks, we've seen positive cases. There is, some indication that we've got students, faculty, and staff that do have positive diagnoses at this time. And the good thing about it, though, is that response to those cases has been very good and very timely. Contact tracing has been taking place immediately. And space closures have followed immediately as well, followed by in-depth sanitation procedures. So really the response to these cases has been outstanding, I think. And I believe that will really help to control the increase in number of cases. We have no reported positive cases off campus at this time. And I'll share with everyone that there is a new COVID-19 data report available at the University of Tennessee Knoxville coronavirus website, and it includes the data for all of UTK and UTIA employees and students. So if you want to see the current case count in terms of specific numbers, you can go to the UTK coronavirus website, and there's a link there that says COVID-19 data. And that data will be updated at least twice a week, and it may even get to the point of being updated daily. So that will provide some up-to-date information. And I know some of you are thinking, gosh, there's positive cases. I wonder who it is, and I wonder if it impacts me. Let me first of all reassure you, if you, every positive case has immediate contact tracing take place. And if you were identified as a direct contact, you would already know that you were a direct contact. You'd have been in touch with one of the contact tracers or someone from the health department, and so you would be informed. So if you don't know, that means you have not been direct contact with one of these cases. So that's hopefully very good news for everyone, because we've had very few cases throughout the Institute, not only this past week, but throughout this pandemic.
We are very fortunate in that regard. So many of us I know have been working on scaling up our offices and reopening them. How is that working in your opinion?
Well, feedback I'm getting and in my own observations, well, not comprehensive, at least I've got a glimpse of what's going on across the Institute. I think everyone's doing a great job in making their offices accessible. And again, that doesn't necessarily mean that every person is there every hour of the day. And in fact, that's not what we want. We want a scaled up reopening process. And I think everyone's been doing a good job of that. I do want to thank our deans, department heads, and directors for making plans and helping to advance the Institute in being more accessible. while we also make every effort we can to keep everyone healthy. So thanks to each of you, we're also seeing, I think, very good compliance with health self-checks, wearing of face coverings, maintaining social distancing, staying home when sick, all those things we talk about every week. I appreciate everyone's compliance with that and willingness to follow those procedures. It makes all the difference. I'd also share that the last couple of weeks, we've had several successful outdoor events that have been conducted largely by UT Extension and largely for our 4-H youth. And those seem to have gone well, and we'll continue to follow all the guidance with regard to conducting meetings or events. But meantime, each of us have to stay vigilant. They have to keep up the good work that I mentioned just previously. Follow all of our health guidance to keep yourself and to keep others safe. And one last point regarding the reopening, for those on campus, you may have joined us for the discussion of our campus facilities on Monday, and there was a question about Mabel's. I have good news. Mabel's will be reopening for those of you on campus on August 17th, which is Monday. So if you're looking for a place to get something to eat and you've been frustrated that there wasn't anything available on the agriculture campus, good news, Mabel's will be there and ready for you on Monday.
Lots of people will be happy to hear that, I'm sure. So one of the things that we know, and research bears this out, and that is that pandemics cause stress. And of course, this one is no different. It may be one of the worst we've ever seen. So I know this has been a concern of yours as you think about the entire UTIA family. So how do we cope?
Well, I think that's a question we're all starting to ask ourselves, or at least let me just speak for myself. And let me say, I remain very positive, very optimistic, because as I just mentioned, ticked off several successes and positive indicators in my earlier remarks. But I'll have to be honest and say, while I think we're doing a great job in delivering real life solutions, there's been times I've felt out of sorts over the past 4 months. Today marks our 20th Fireside Chat, and if you'd asked me in early March if we'd be having 20, institute-wide town halls or Fireside Chats, I'd have said, no way, we'll be past this issue long before that. But here we are, and I think it's time we really think about how do we cope with the challenges that we're facing today. The good news is we've got one of our own experts to join us for a discussion, and that is Dr. Heather Seges, who is an associate professor in family and consumer sciences. Heather joined UT Extension in 2014, and she is a human development specialist focusing on individual and family well-being. And so I think that really is a great topic then for us to focus on today. I'd like to ask Heather a few questions, but as usual, we of course also invite our audience to enter questions as well. And remember, you can ask them to Lisa Stearns privately through the chat box. So Heather, thanks so much for joining us. We're glad to have an expert in this area on today's Fireside Chat. So let me just start out and ask you, why are we all so stressed out these days? Well, why am I so stressed out?
Okay, well, you're a whole different story. So I don't know if I get that in one Fireside Chat, but I can tell you this, all of us are experiencing some kind of stress, and it's because of our brains. It's not only because of what is happening around us and all the different little things and frustrations every day. It's because our brains don't know where to put a pandemic. We've never dealt with this before. So if we have a fear of going to the dentist, for instance, we know that, okay, that might be anxiety inducing, it might cause a little bit of stress, but our brains have a whole category that it very efficiently, it puts it in and says, okay, but you're going to be all right in the end. Not so much with the pandemic. And so when our brains are trying to find where to put all of these stresses, like, am I going to get sick? Are my family members at risk? Should I, what's the right answer? That causes stress, not only in our brains, but then it makes our whole systems react, because it's releasing a hormone called cortisol. And that starts to make us feel really, like you said, out of sorts. It can really make us feel tired at times and lead to some depression and feelings of just kind of disengagement and lack of motivation.
Well, so it's a problem with my brain. I knew you would help me with this, Heather. Thank you. So with that said, well, what can we do to really reduce or manage the stress that we're facing?
Yeah, the good news is that there's lots that we can do. I think the first thing, though, is to for all of us to realize that we're not going to make stress go away. That's just not a possibility. And so instead, what I like to say is start having a relationship with your stress. Start to recognize it. Start to see how it feels in your system. I'm a shoulder clencher, and so that's how I can feel that at the end of the day. So really start, you can do this by setting some reminders in your phone. You can keep a log. There's lots of different things you can do to start to recognize when you're feeling stressed and how that's manifesting in your body. And then once you recognize it, there's lots of strategies you can use to reduce it. There's mindfulness activities, breathing exercises, taking a walk outside. Doesn't matter how long, doesn't matter how short, just get outside and take a walk. Any exercise is one of the great things that really takes that hormone cortisol that I talked about earlier, and it helps it dissipate it. It really helps the brain process it. So it doesn't have to be strenuous exercise at all. It could be just taking a short walk. But there are a number of other additional things that we can do too.
So it sounds like there are some things we can do. You've identified a few. I suspect there's others as well. Are there any sorts of resources we can look to, or any summaries of this information that might be helpful?
Absolutely. So I created an Adobe Spark page. It was my first one, so I don't get any extra points for making it pretty. But what I did was I created and curated a lot of resources about this very issue for everyone. You can access that, and I hope we can get a link in the chat box. There we go, Mike. Thank you so much. It's at tiny.utk.edu/manage stress. And what you'll see there are buttons that you can click on. You can watch an extended presentation that I gave just this week about this topic. You can also access the slides that I use, and in those slides, there's live links to things like those logs that I just mentioned that you can kind of note how you're feeling. And what's interesting about keeping those logs is you can see change over time. A lot of us are very data-minded individuals, and collecting data is really a great way to help teach yourself about yourself and see it over time. So if you feel like, oh, I feel like I've been in this funk forever, well, you're actually not as bad as you were a few weeks ago. But there's other resources there as well that I want to point to. A couple of our extension publications, of course. But one that I really am a very big advocate for is our Employee Assistance Program. And I put a direct link to that. And I will be very direct and honest. I have used the resources through EAP, and I have been very impressed with the efficiency, the confidentiality, and how fast you can get into service. And so what's great is that they've actually brokered a partnership with an app called Talkspace, and you can call our EAP number. It's confidential, and it's not run through UT. It's a whole separate group, so it's not tied to anything here. Just call that number, kind of say what's on your mind, and they'll give you an authorization code. Then you go to the link on their page for Talkspace, enter that code. You get 5 free sessions with somebody right from your phone or your computer that you can just vent to. And Then every time you've got a new stressor, you call that number back up, you get 5 more free sessions. EAP also has resources on helping to find things like childcare, home maintenance. So if you are stressed about your stress, you can deal with that, but you can also deal with some of the daily life stressors through some of their resources as well.
Great. That looks like a helpful resource, and I hope everyone will take advantage of those. As you mentioned, EAP is one of our benefits. You know, we routinely take advantage of our health benefit or our tuition discount benefit. EAP is just yet another one of those employee benefits that's there for all of us. So appreciate you pointing that out. I see Dr. David Merker's on here. He's with our Forestry, Wildlife, and Fisheries Department. I want to make sure Dr. Merker understood you right. You said to keep a log, but you mean a written log, right?
No, you can get very creative with it. If you would like to carve into a log your personal stress score each day, I think that's a totally acceptable practice.
Any thoughts, Dr. Merker?
I agree. Yeah.
Very good. All right.
Now I'll let it ride at that.
Thank you, David. Sorry to single you out. Well, good. Well, Heather, you know, we always talk about how we're a family, that we have a family atmosphere here at the Institute of Agriculture. And, you know, sometimes we'll notice one of our family members may seem to be in need of support or seem to be in need of help. How do you suggest we approach that kind of concern?
Yeah, so that's a tricky one, but there's ways to handle that. First of all, I think really observing and kind of making some notes for yourself. And if you have a relationship with that person, sitting down and even if you don't quite have a relationship, just saying, hey, we're around each other enough. Right now during a pandemic, we're not around a whole lot of people, but we are. And I've noticed some of these things. To me, if I were experiencing or exhibiting those behaviors, that would kind of be an indicator that I'm a little stressed out. I care for you. I don't want you to be stressed out, and we want to do our best work. So, you know, is there something specific I can help you with? Kind of reaching out in that way. But then there's also a resource through our counseling center here on campus. And again, I would encourage you to use the EAP resource off campus. And helping someone call and just say, I just need to talk through something really quick. We can do that. And again, those resources are linked on that Spark page. The other important part here is to talk to supervisors and your regional directors and making sure that they're informed about what you're seeing. We have to take care of each other. This is a very frightening time, and we need to be open with one another when we've had back-to-back Zoom meetings and we just can't have one more. That, you know, our sciatic pain is flaring up and we're just gonna lose it if we have to sit for one more hour. I think if there's ever a time for us to be open and honest with each other, now is the time. I would encourage people to err on the side of checking in on each other than staying quiet.
Great, excellent suggestions. And you know, when we're emphasizing staying apart, it seems ironic to say don't forget to connect and stay together. But we do need to take care of one another. Appreciate that advice. Well, Lisa, let me pause just a minute, see if we have some questions.
Well, we have the perfect, that was a perfect segue to this question, which is, Heather, is there any research on how Zoom video conferencing actually contributes to stress? Because this person says 1 hour of Zooming seems equal to 2 normal work hours.
Yeah, so I'm gonna go back to the brain to explain this one. It has to do with what we call cognitive load. And so that's the amount of work that our brains are doing to not only process information, but we are processing information in a novel way right now. Our brains are not used to sitting in front of a screen talking to people all day long. We do it here and there, but not usually. So, so the cognitive load is really high. And then if you're trying to figure out the technology itself, or there's always an update, there's always this, there's always that, which are very good. We all need to stay updated, but that can add to that cognitive load. In addition, maintaining eye contact, staying on so that you can, I mean, because sometimes let's be honest, in an in-person meeting, you can kind of doodle on your paper and you can kind of look around, you can swing your feet, you can do that sort of thing. On a Zoom, if you do that, you may look very disengaged. So staying at attention and trying to deal with the technology without the interpersonal, real life feedback that our brains and psychologically we crave as people, without having that, it is a lot more stressful. So yeah, that's a real thing.
So I don't think it, well, let me jump to this question first. So Heather, this person is asking, how do I know when my depression is more severe than the typical day-to-day ups and downs? And, could it be related to this pandemic?
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. So I always like to, and this is where kind of tracking how you feel, just create a scoring system for yourself. It doesn't have to be the best thing. I like to use a 5-point scale, something with a real midpoint. And so set an alarm on your phone or tie it to a routine of brushing your teeth in the morning, where you just kind of jot down maybe how you're feeling that at that point. I'm a 5, I'm feeling great. We're ready for the day. We're feeling wonderful. Whereas a 1 is, I didn't get out of bed until about 1:30 today. Mm-hmm. So keep that kind of log for about 2 weeks and kind of look at that. Some immediate and acute symptoms are going to be inability to fall asleep for multiple nights in a row, not staying asleep, or sleeping too much. And the reason why I mentioned sleep is that's how our brains are trying to process all of this stress. So that's how sleep is related to this. Over or under eating is also another symptom. So, and this is above and beyond what's normal. So carbs were my very best, they still are my best friend during the pandemic, but they were really my best friend in the beginning. And there's lots of great science related to why we eat carbs when we're a little down. But so those are symptoms. If we're feeling increasingly agitated, like nothing is going right, that kind of feeling, if you're feeling that all day, every day, if people are saying, hey, are you all right? Start to listen to what other people are saying to you. That's an indicator for that. Drinking too much alcohol, using drugs are ways that our bodies want to give our brain a good feeling. And when that happens in excess, it's a real sign that we're trying to self-medicate. So, and I would be remiss if I did not say, thinking of ways to hurt yourself, hurt others. If you want to just disappear and never come back again, those kinds of thoughts of wanting the pain, you can't think of any other way out. Those are very serious symptoms, and you should talk to your doctor or call EAP immediately. What I would do, and if you're even asking the question, I've been down for a while, maybe I'm just maybe I am getting a little depressed. You know what? Make a phone call to EAP. It's free. Better to err on the side of getting a little bit of support and talking to someone and seeing maybe you really do have a little episodic issue with depression. It can be a short-term thing. It doesn't mean you're like that for the rest of your life. And so a professional can really help you understand and process and clarify whether medication might be helpful or whether just using some techniques can help you through this time.
Great. This one, Tim, maybe for you, and that is, when will we receive our wellness kits? Are you all familiar with that?
That probably is for me, and I know that they packed all of them, and then the trick is getting them all distributed. And until Monday, at least on campus, of course, our buildings were still locked, so they couldn't even begin to come to our campus, our part of campus, until Monday at the earliest. I don't have a delivery date yet, but that's something I'll follow up on as well. I've got a conversation with the Emergency Operations Center, I think later today, so that'll be a good point for me to follow up on and see. And you know, it reminds me, I haven't got mine yet either, so we're all being treated equally well in this regard.
So, and Tim, here's another one for you, and that is, when will we be able to travel to events without having to telecommute for 2 weeks upon our return?
Well, honestly, even right now, I think our guidance is that what you should do if you are traveling to an event, and I'm assuming this is largely in-state, but even out of state, if you're traveling, discuss the circumstances of that travel with your supervisor. Think about where you're going, how you're getting there, where you're going to be staying if it's overnight, what exposures you would have to possible direct contacts. Think about whether, you know, it's a place that's experiencing a large increase in cases, or if it's a place that has had a relatively small number. And then really it's a matter of deciding between you and your supervisor what makes sense, both to travel there and what to do upon return. If a mandatory 14-day remote working situation is going to be required, or if the practices that you're going to follow and the place that you're going to go is such that you can return to the workplace.
Right, and then another one about, this is about the self-checks that we've been asked to use, and the question is, how religiously are those checks being used and or monitored? And are we really finding that faculty and staff are using this to report? And also, are students required to do this?
I think there's seven questions in there when you go back to the start. So are we using them? Well, I know we are, because I get notifications, not from everyone, of course, but for those who report to me, I get a daily notification. And honestly, it's helpful because that tells me that those individuals are here on campus. They're reporting to work. And it's just good to know, because in this day and time, it seems like we almost never know, is somebody in, or are they out, are they planning to be in, what's their schedule. It's been hard to keep track of all that, I suspect, for most of us. So for our supervisor, it's a really good tool just to have that data point to say, okay, that individual is here, they're cleared, and they're okay to come to work. I think another question in there was, is it really making any difference, or is it, is it just an exercise, or is it having an impact? I'll tell you, we've had individuals who have answered yes to a question, and it triggers a whole set of responses, and we follow up on those. So it is used. I think, I can't attest to whether everyone's being totally honest every day to every question. I hope so. But I do know that when honestly people have said, yes, I've had a couple of these symptoms, or yes, I think I may have been exposed or been in direct contact with a positive case, that does trigger follow-up, and we act on that immediately. So it really is used. It's not just going into some data repository that's never acted on. And I know there was at least one more question in there, and that was, are students doing this? And the answer to that is yes. And if you're doing it, you're going to see when you go in, there's a button for students and there's another button for faculty and staff. So you'll notice that there is a set of questions that's under a separate link for the students.
So specifically, are the students required to do this, or?
Yes, yes. All students, faculty, and staff are required to do it every morning before reporting to campus.
Got it.
And I define campus in this case to be a UTIA office. So let me make sure we're clear on that. We want to follow that same practice across the state as well. And I think it's one of the things that actually really has, it reminds you, it's sort of like Heather's suggestion, you know, start a little tally and set a reminder in your phone. It's just one of those reminders. If you're not feeling quite right, you know, that question may cause you to pause just a moment and think, today I may need to stay home rather than report to work. So I think anything we can do to reinforce that, you know, if you've been exposed, if you've had a fever, if you don't feel quite right, if you've had a couple symptoms, let's err on the side of caution and stay home.
So there's a question. How do we know that the students are doing this? I mean, can we really know if they are doing the check-in?
Well, I think the student data is going to student success or student affairs. So I don't see that data, I'll be honest. I don't. And if I had 29,000 emails coming to me from all the students, I'm not sure what I'd do with it. But I do know there's a way to monitor that data as well. And they'll keep track and make sure, again, that students are doing the required reporting there as well. Keep in mind also that a good portion of our students are taking the majority of their courses online. And so those that are off campus taking online courses may not be completing that self-check every day because they may not be coming to campus every day either.
Okay. So apparently the DVM students have been doing a great job. They report to the clinicians that head the service that they are in. So that's how the veterinary medicine students are doing that. It's a good point. So Heather, here's a question for you. So many of us have children, and children are having a tough time, as we have heard, processing what a pandemic truly is and why things have changed for them. How do you identify that they may be struggling a bit with stress?
That's a really great question. And a lot of the same ways we do for adults. Changes in sleeping patterns, increased irritability, loss of interest in what they're usually interested in doing. So if you've got a Lego lover who hasn't touched their Legos in a few weeks, it's time to start asking some questions like, you know, it's really difficult. I think for children, what happened was that they were really, we all were, ripped from their day-to-day context. And what we always stress when working with children is to ease transitions, to do a little bit at a time, right? And that didn't get to happen for them. And so all of a sudden, they were stuck at home. And what's happening too at home, here's the other thing, is that when adults are stressed in the home, we have something in our brains called mirror neurons. It's what helps us feel empathy towards other people and recognize that someone else might be in pain. It also does that for stress. So think about how you feel when you encounter someone who's really mad. You start to feel a little agitated, right? Same thing for children. They have those mirror neurons too. So if parents are really stressed in the home, the children are feeling that as well. There's some really great ways to help kids manage the stress that they're feeling, helping them connect with their friends in ways that are, if they're old enough to do this, and that's set up a Zoom meeting for them and their friends. I actually hooked up FaceTime for my son and a couple of my friends' children, put it on our TV in our living room, and they all had their own Lego sets, and they were kind of playing together, but at the same, but distantly. So that's think creatively of options like that. Really, if your children are still at home and will be for a while, really focusing on creating routines and helping them stay with them, and start a new tradition. Maybe make something fun out of it. Start to share a craft together, or always going for a walk after dinner or something like that. Starting to introduce some new traditions that they can look forward to throughout their day. Children like clear black and white certainty in their life, and this is not that. You can have a very clear answer about something. You know, something as simple as, here's what we're having for dinner for the next couple of nights. Helping them really be able to predict what's going to be happening in their lives, because the uncertainty is what's contributing to that stress as well for them.
Great advice. Well, it looks like those are all our questions today. So, Tim, do you have any final thoughts?
Well, I do, and in the interest of not adding to our Zoom fatigue, I think this makes a good point to wrap up. So let me, though, revisit that. I'll follow up on the wellness kits, and I'll also follow up on where in the world are the student health self-checks going. I honestly never thought about that question, but it's one I ought to know. I apologize for not having that answer, but we'll follow up on that and make that information available. And let me then move to thanking Dr. Seges for joining us today. Heather, you know, it's important for us, obviously, to take care of ourselves, or we can't do anything for anyone else. So appreciate you joining us, sharing some great advice, some great knowledge, and also sharing the resources that you made available too. So thanks for being with us, Heather. Any last remarks you want to share?
Just to take a moment to give yourself a little bit of grace. This is a tough time, and we are all stressed. So make stress your new annoying best friend. Thanks so much for having me. I really, really appreciate it.
Great. Thanks so much, Heather. Well, so let me just follow up on that. I do believe, absolutely believe, we're going to get through this. We'll get through it together. We'll get through it by helping one another, by taking care of ourselves. And I also believe, ultimately, we'll be better in some ways as a result of having gone through this pandemic. With that in mind, I ran across a quote earlier this week from John F. Kennedy that I thought was really appropriate in the situation we're in, and that his quote is, the Chinese use 2 brush strokes to write the word crisis. One brush stroke stands for danger, and the other stands for opportunity. In a crisis, be aware of the danger, but recognize the opportunity. So I think, you know, clearly in this COVID-19 pandemic, there is certainly danger, and we see that, or at least the risk, we see the risk very clearly. We may not always, you know, initially identify the opportunities, but I think we're starting to see more and more opportunities as well. So let's continue to be mindful of what new research and education needs might be out there, about ways we can implement new methods of meeting those needs, ways we can modernize our work procedures, and really recognize some of those opportunities that JFK referred to. So with that, I'm going to say, as usual, I hope each of you have a great weekend. Stay in touch with your supervisor, stay in touch with your coworkers. Let us know how we can help or support you. I always appreciate the questions, because just like today, you know, we've had a couple just have not occurred to me, but if they've occurred to you, they're important, and we want to make sure we can provide you those answers and share with you some certainty about some of these things that we're all facing. So with that, I'm going to say thanks for joining us once again, and again, have a great weekend. Thank you, Lisa.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks, Heather, and see you next week, everyone.